Dr. Nigel Croft has been actively involved in quality management since 1974, when he began his career in the British steel industry as a student apprentice. He's now recognized as one of the world's foremost experts in quality management and conformity assessment of management systems. Nigel, take it away.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be taking part in this International Auditor Symposium again this year. What we thought we would do for this presentation is to talk about the elephant in the room, which of course is the transition to the 2015 version of ISO 9001, the deadline for which expires in September this year, 2018. But rather than just concentrating on that, I thought we could look at what next, what comes after that transition, and how can organizations really look at building on their quality management system, not only to meet the requirements of a standard, but to be able to use it for their own management purposes to help them to be a better organization. And in the broader context, to look at what we now all know as sustainable development and the various components of that that it can affect an organization's overall business. So first of all, let's just take a look at how ISO 9001 has evolved over the years. I see the 2015 version of ISO 9001 very much as being a process of evolution. It's not revolutionary. This is a slide I used from last year, and I make no apology for it. But just to put the background, 9001, of course, was first published in 1987, over 30 years ago. Ironically, on March the 15th, which is the day that I'm actually recording this, this webinar, it was very, very prescriptive. It was very focused on manufacturing industry, had a strong heritage from the nuclear, the aerospace, petrochemical, military industries, and so on. And very much implemented on an elemental clause-by-clause basis. Of course, we had the minor revision to that in 1994, and then along came the year 2000 version. This is where ISO 9001 really started becoming aligned with the way that organizations do business. We introduced the idea of the process approach. That continued in the minor tweak that we did to the standard in 2008, and essentially focused on the way that organizations manage their business, the way that the various activities fit together as processes which add value and will deliver products and services that meet customer requirements, whether those customers are internal or external customers. And in fact, an organization that has embraced that process approach, embraced that idea of managing processes using plan, do, check, act in a way that reflects the realities of their business, should really have very little difficulty, or should have had very little difficulty in making the transition to ISO 9001 2015. That evolutionary process in the 2015 version, we pushed much, much more on the idea of performance. I'll mention in a couple of minutes this idea that output matters. It's not just a question of managing individual processes. It's not just a question of having individual components of the management system meeting individual requirements of a standard. It's that holistic approach that says, okay, we're doing all of these things. Is that delivering on the promise and on the objective of our quality management system of consistently providing conforming products and services to the customers? And so we've added in to that 2008 approach the idea of risk-based thinking, not necessarily requiring all organizations to have a risk management system. Clearly for small and medium enterprises, that may be something that is a step too far and a little bit overboard in terms of requirements. But this concept of risk-based thinking, that not all processes have the same impact on quality as others, Some need to be more carefully managed. We need probably more documentation, more competent, not necessarily more competent people, but more clearly defined competence requirements for those particular activities. Because if something goes wrong with them, then the system will not achieve its objectives. So those three components, and I hope everybody is now very familiar with that, those three components act together. It's not process or risk-based thinking or PDCA. It's understanding what processes are important for the system to achieve its results, whether it's ISO 9001 and we're talking about product and service quality, or ISO 14001, or now we have the ISO 45001 for health and safety management. What are the processes we need to manage to make sure that that system delivers on its promise? Second, that idea of risk-based thinking. Which is most important? Which are the most important processes? Where do we need to concentrate our attention? Of course, not ignoring the less important processes, but maybe taking a lighter approach to the way we manage them. And then plan, do, check, act at the individual process level, and taking a step back, looking at how the processes fit together at the system level. And of course, that's where things like internal audits and management reviews come into play. As far as the transition is concerned, back in 2014, this was at the draft international standard stage. Technical Committee 176, ISO Casco, the Conformity Assessment Committee of ISO, and the International Accreditation Forum had already announced that there would be a 3-year transition period. The 9001 2015 version was actually published on the 15th of September, and all organizations were strongly encouraged to start the transition as soon as possible, based even on the draft international standard. So I don't have an awful lot of sympathy with people who've left it to the last minute. I believe that those organizations that had truly embraced the concepts and the ideas behind the 2008 version would have made very, very little changes to be able to adapt to the new philosophy and the new structure of the 2015 version. However, we did have detailed guidance that is available for free download if anybody's not yet seen it on the IAF website. It's IAF Informative Document 9, published in 2015. And there's been a lot of speculation. Well, you know, what happens if people can't make the deadline? What happens if, you know, they can't get enough auditors to do the audit? And in its meeting in October last year, the IAF has emphasized there will be no extension to that transition deadline. That means that beginning today, as I record this webinar, all audits have to be based on ISO 9001 2015. No more auditing under an accredited certification scheme can be carried out to the previous versions of the standard. And after the 15th of September, all ISO 9001 2008 accredited certificates are no longer valid. So we're approaching that deadline. Let's look a little bit about some of that key thinking behind the ISO 9001 2015 standard, because this permeates also throughout other management system standards. Obviously, the important thing to remember is that what we want is a system of a documented system, rather, not a system of documents. The emphasis should be managing processes, managing the people, managing the equipment, managing the methodologies that those equipment and people interact, managing them as processes to deliver conforming outputs. Whether that means a product that meets customer requirements and regulatory requirements, or whether it means an environmentally friendly outcome, or whether it means a safe outcome, or in other contexts, whether it means um, a bribery-free or a corruption-free outcome, if we're looking at anti-corruption or anti-bribery management systems. What are the processes that need to be managed? So yes, of course, some documentation is necessary, but we're not looking for a system of documents. For me, the most critical thing of the ISO 9001:2015 standard that some organizations will have difficulty in getting their heads around is that the standard requires you to think for yourselves. It doesn't say, this is what you have to do and this is how you have to do it. It says, you need to look at your business and you need to decide what is important to me. How am I going to manage that so that I can consistently get the results that I want? Of course, the system should not be carved in stone. It has to allow flexibility and agility. You know, when we were developing the standard back in the early 2010, 2012 sort of timeframe, we were looking at some of the concepts that we might want to incorporate and allow for in the standard, and organizational agility was one of them. We move in a fast-moving world. Organizations need to be able to identify and seize opportunities as they arise, but equally adapt to the risks that are posed by an ever-changing business context. This phrase became almost a mantra in the development of ISO 9001:2015. This is something that we came up with together with our colleagues in the auditing and conformity assessment community. And then we can think about it in terms of cause and effect diagram. If we think of a quality management system, this is not exhaustive, but of course we need effective leadership. Of course we need competent people, calibrated equipment, internal audits, management review, etc., etc., etc. But the output of that, we should never forget, must be consistent, conforming products and services. If it's not, then the system is not working. I don't care how many hours of training you conduct. I don't care how many pieces of calibrated equipment you have. I don't care how many operating procedures or work instructions or so on. If the system is not delivering on this promise, and that is right at the top front of ISO 9001, consistent conforming products and services, then something is wrong. So wherever we talk about the effectiveness of the system, what we're talking about, if we look at the ISO 9000 definition, is the ability to achieve the planned results. ISO 9001 specifies that as a minimum, the system should provide confidence in the organization's ability to provide consistent conforming product. But let's not forget that is the minimum. An organization may have additional broader results that it wants to achieve using its quality management system as a base. Maybe in terms of productivity, it may be in terms of expanding its market, it may be in terms of other dimensions, such as, for example, some of the sustainability aspects, social responsibility, managing the supply chain, and so on. So the ISO 9001 should be acting as the very, very basic building block on which to move further. 3 core concepts I've already mentioned. Understand the processes needed to achieve the planned results. That doesn't just mean manufacturing processes, of course. Competence building is a process. Auditing is a process. It has its inputs, it involves a series of activities, and it has its outputs in the form of audit reports, in the form of recommendations, non-conformities, and so on, if we're looking at the internal auditing context. Continually monitor the risks, recognizing that not all the risks have the same impact, and managing the processes of the system using PDCA at all levels. The problem that I see it, if I'm very honest, I would say that there are still organizations out there who've not yet fully understood and or embraced the process approach. which was introduced almost 20 years ago. It was certainly introduced in the final draft of ISO 9001-2000, 1999. So those who still have that clause-by-clause mentality, whether they're organizations or whether they are auditors or certification bodies, we know that there are still some auditors out there who are still auditing on that clause-by-clause basis, and they don't have and will probably never be able to acquire the necessary competence for the organizations that they are being asked to audit. Some will not be able to make the transition. If I'm a little bit abrupt, I would say, good. It's time for them to retire. Let's get rid of them, and let's focus on the people who are able to understand the business, add value, and be able to help organizations by conducting constructive audits, not by providing consultancy. Of course, that's a no-no as far as third-party auditing is concerned, of course. But we don't want those tick-the-box auditors anymore. So I think self-analysis is a very important tool when we look at auditor competence. Self-assessment. I'm pretty sure that you know who you are, the auditors who don't feel comfortable looking at the process. If you are an organization and you are receiving audits by outmoded, outdated, preconceived ideas, clause-by-clause auditors, you should be complaining to, in the case of a certification body, to the certification body constructively and saying, we want more. You are paying for an audit. You deserve to have an audit, not a superficial audit, a rigorous audit that ensures that the standard, whether it's 9001 or 14001 or whatever, ensures that the standard is in place and is effective, and equally will add value to you as an organization to help you to identify your weak points. So what's next? Let's look a little bit beyond this transition, beyond September 15th, 2018. First of all, the big three management system standards are now complete. Well, they will be complete in a question of days or a couple of weeks. 9001, 14001, published back in 2015, aligned in their structure, aligned in the what we call the identical text, where we're talking about common elements, using the same wording, the so-called Annex SL. And now ISO 45000 is about to be published to substitute the OSHA's 18001 Health and Safety Management System standard. We have a whole range of other standards that I'll touch on in a few slides' time. And organizations are beginning to realize that they shouldn't be talking about integrating their systems. They should be talking about having a single system, a management system that is structured in such a way that it can meet the changing business needs. Whether today it's important to have a focus and be able to demonstrate confidence to potential customers. Yes, you can buy my products and services with confidence, so I have an ISO 9001 certificate. Tomorrow, those organizations are probably being asked for ISO 14001 environmental management, health and safety management, anti-bribery management, energy management, and so on and so on. So it's not a question of trying to shoehorn all of those things into an integrated system. We need to make sure that the organization is managing its business in order to be able to adapt and modify for whatever standard anybody throws at them now or in the future, or whatever becomes important for them. So we can think of, and I like to think of, ISO 9001 as a starting point in the sustainability journey. It's a question of the approach. We know that there are organizations who traditionally have taken that, what we call the minimalist approach. What's the minimum I have to do to get this certificate, which will allow me to take part in in a tender or be considered as a supplier for these particular customers? Now, there is nothing inherently wrong with the minimalist approach as long as that organization does actually do the minimum that ISO 9001 actually requires. And that's, of course, where the role of the auditor comes in, and the role of the certification bodies and the accreditation bodies, to make sure that organizations are doing the minimum and that that minimum is effective in providing the expected outcomes from the system. The second approach that I see in many parts of the world in a number of organizations is that organizations have all these wonderful total quality initiatives. They're using Baldrige, they're using EFQM, they're using Deming, they're using systems thinking, but they are done separately from ISO 9000. It's as if ISO 9000 is run by one part of the organization and the total quality initiatives are run by a different part of the organization. That makes me sad because I think it sub-optimizes the things that the system can do for an organization. I understand why some organizations choose to, have some parts of their quality initiatives outside of the system. But I think it's sad that they have to do that. And normally it comes down to the fact that, oh, well, we have this quality circle activities. We have the suggestions plan. We're doing small team continuous improvement activities. But we want to keep these out of the system so that when the auditor comes along and finds that they're not actually happening exactly the way they're supposed to, we don't get a non-conformity. So again, we have to work on that mentality. Top management is supporting those initiatives for a reason. Top management wants to see results from those initiatives. And so we really should be embracing all of the total quality initiatives. I didn't mention, Six Sigma, lean manufacturing. All of these good things should be part of the overall system, and they should be managed in such a way that it helps the organization to achieve its objectives. And so the third approach, the one that we've, when you look at some of the granular requirements in ISO 9001:2015, we want to promote the system to be integrated into the way the organization does business. And you can see that in some of the requirements as far as leadership is concerned, particularly in terms of quality objectives and so on. We want to encourage a process-driven, results-focused system that aligns with the overall organizational strategy and objectives and is integrated with other management system components. And I'll talk in a few minutes about this question of aligning with organizational strategy and objectives, because that's where the other part of the equation starts to come into play, ISO 9004, the guidelines for achieving sustained success. But if we look at the very first sentence of ISO 9001:2015, this comes back to the whole business of sustainable development. And this actually was taken, we felt it was very important to put this into ISO 9001 because over the last 10 years or so, people have sort of got the impression that sustainability is all about social responsibility and environmental questions, and they've forgotten the economic component, that in order to be able to justify and finance all of those things, an organization has to be successful. What's important to its success? Well, of course, being able to consistently provide products and services that meet customer requirements. And so this phrase that's in the very first sentence of 9001 is very closely aligned with our Subcommittee 2 mission statement for TC 176. The adoption of the quality management system is a strategic decision. It can help an organization to improve its overall performance if it's done right, and it provides a sound basis for those sustainable development initiatives. Also, taken from ISO 9000. We then get into the question of organizational culture. Do organizations really care about quality? Of course, many of them do. And many organizations, for many organizations, achieving ISO 9001 certification is really a no-brainer, because that is a consequence of all the other things that are going on within that culture of quality within the organization. Equally, we know that some organizations don't really care. They just want the certificate, and as long as they do the minimum and the results that they're achieving are acceptable from the perspective of achieving the objectives of certification, that's fine. But really, it's a big waste of a lot of effort that is put in to developing the system if it is suboptimized. And so I think this phrase taken from ISO 9000 is very, very important. An organization focused on quality promotes a culture that results in the behavior, attitudes, activities, and processes that deliver value through fulfilling the needs and expectations of customers and other relevant interested parties. The ethical dimension starts to come into that. And I'm sure many people are aware of some of the scandals that have happened in recent years involving major corporations. And we need to promote that as an important philosophy within the quality management philosophy. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So we have these different perspectives. When we set out to develop the latest versions of ISO 9001 and ISO 9004, we wanted to make sure that we understood and that people understand that ISO 9001 is focused on providing confidence in the quality of an organization's products and services. Of course, organizations who implement ISO 9001 in a healthy, wholesome way will get benefits associated with that. They'll have secondary benefits of reducing waste, getting improved communication within the organization, understanding their processes better, and so on. But that is not the core objective of ISO 9001. ISO 9001 was born and continues to focus on achieving products and services that meet customer requirements. ISO 9004, we decided that conceptually we'll focus on the quality of the organization itself. In other words, it will be wider in scope and it will be a greater depth than ISO 9001. We want to make sure that organizations really can be efficient as well as being effective, that they are aligned in the way that they manage their processes and are able to achieve much more as a stepping stone towards the question of sustainable development. And so the new ISO 9004 standard that is about to be published any day now, it's definitely going to be second quarter of 2018. Might take a minute just to congratulate the team under my subcommittee of Working Group 25, who really achieved an extraordinary result. It's one of the few standards in recent time that actually got 100% approval rating for the final draft international standard. So we've got a very strong degree of consensus around 9004. It's a guidance standard. It orients organizations how to use the quality management system to achieve long-term sustained success. It emphasizes the need for the quality management system to align with the vision, mission, values, and culture of an organization. And it includes an enhanced maturity assessment model. The standard, I'm very proud of the standard. I believe it's a very good standard, very, very well written. The problem is that if people don't use it, it won't have the impact that we would like it to have. And the problem is that many organizations, those quality organizations with the underlying quality culture, there's really nothing new in ISO 9004 for them. ISO 9004 can have a huge impact on those organizations that have stopped with the bare implementation of ISO 9001. To be able to build on that system to help them to be a better, more successful organization in the long term. The problem is that some of those organizations look at ISO 9004 and they say, well, there's no requirements in there. I'm not going to get a certificate at the end of the day, so why bother? And I'm sure the Deming fans among the audience, I count myself as a big fan of Deming, will remember Deming's famous words, you don't have to do any of this because, of course, survival is not compulsory. So when we look at ISO 9004, what we start to see, I've taken this from the final draft international standard, is the linkages between what the standard calls its organizational identity, the mission, the vision, the values, and the culture of the organization, how those all fit together within the organizational context, within the social, economic, environmental, cultural set of factors in which the organization is inserted, whether it's a regional or a geographical, or whether it's a heritage kind of situation. How is that organizational identity related to the strategy, the policy, and the objectives that the organization adopts in order to meet the needs and expectations of its customers and other relevant interested parties? Now, of course, other relevant interested parties absolutely includes the shareholders. It includes the senior management. It may not be a for-profit organization. It may be a charity. It may be a not-for-profit. It may be part of a governmental entity. But any organization will have customers, those who receive the outputs of its activities, and there will be other relevant interested parties, maybe the taxpayer who is paying for a public health service, who, of course, they want a health service that meets the requirements and produces a consistent, conforming service to the population. But equally, as we know, resources are scarce. People want to do more with less. There will never be enough money for health professionals, however dedicated and however proactive they may be. There will never be enough money for them to do everything they would like to do. And so we need to focus on efficiency as well as effectiveness. We then deploy that down into process management, which is clause 8 of ISO 9004, linked into resource management, performance evaluation, and improvement, learning, and innovation. Much more focus on innovation here. Although we use the innovation word and introduce the idea into ISO 9001, it's very difficult to say to an organization, you have to innovate. That should be something that is self-induced or comes out of a desire to do things better than the opposition. And out of that, the result, confidence in the organization's ability to meet the needs and expectations of customers and other relevant interested parties, and to enhance their satisfaction. So what we're looking at here is a business excellence journey. Obviously, we have organizations down here who have very little thoughts about quality. They will maybe move along the increasing maturity journey. Maybe some consultants or somebody will come along and say, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And they will be maybe have some flavor of the month quality related activity that is not really done on a formal systematic basis. The ISO 9001 and its associated sector standards, just mentioned a couple there, TL 9000 for telecom, IATF 16949 for automotive. We could also mention 9100 for aerospace and so on. Focus on product and service quality. As a result of that, we get improvements in the organization itself. And as we move beyond this, we can start looking at ISO 9004 organizational quality and eventually focus on organizational excellence. In order to do that, we need to drive the scientific and technical excellence. In other words, what Deming would say, there is no substitute for profound knowledge. Profound knowledge of your business, profound technical knowledge, profound market knowledge, profound knowledge of what the competition is doing, and so on. And use of the appropriate quality tools and methodologies to support the system. The right tools at the right time, used intelligently. We know that there are many organizations who learn a tool and then go out to seek an application for that tool that they've learned, rather than looking at their business and saying, what is the best tool that will help me to solve the problems that I have to confront? We have a saying in English that if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. Now, a hammer is an excellent tool if it's in the hands of a skilled carpenter making woodwork and making furniture and so on. But you can also do an awful lot of damage with a hammer if it's not used wisely. So when we start looking at this business excellence journey, of course, I'm biased, but I believe it starts with building awareness on quality. But let's not forget this whole sustainable development dimension. These are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were developed by the United Nations in the 2015 timeframe. They were signed off by all heads of state, and they are really quite ambitious in some of their specific objectives. Zero poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, affordable and clean energy, industry, innovation and infrastructure. This is where primarily ISO 9001 comes in, but we start seeing things like sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, green economy, circular economy, climate action. So we start seeing the ISO 14001 dimension coming in. Life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions. What we start to see is that many of these goals can be supported by management system and other related standards. Some of you will have seen this figure before. I try to use it and update it occasionally. This is the so-called triple bottom line: economic growth, environmental integrity, social responsibility. And this is where I see the different standards fitting. Started, of course, with ISO 9001, quality management requirements, the various sector derivatives, and there are just a few. We have information security management, we have IT service delivery, we have food safety management. The ISO 22000 standard is also currently under revision. Over here we have environmental 14001, we have water efficiency management, water utilities crisis management, sustainable event management, ISO 20121. We now will have the final part of the trilogy, ISO 45001, health and safety. I didn't specifically put ISO 26000 here because my friends in the social responsibility arena always advise me it's not a management system standard, it's not a requirement standard, but it can be used very successfully within a management system framework. And so on. You know, we have one of the newer standards that's causing a lot of buzz around the world is the anti-bribery management system standard, ISO 37001. But equally, we have the energy management, asset management, and so on. Many of you, I hope, will be familiar with the so-called Annex SL. The Annex SL to the ISO directives was quite controversial when it was published in 2012. But Annex SL provides a common high-level structure and some identical texts and common definitions, in an aim to harmonize all of these standards that you see on the screen now and more. And I personally believe that the benefits to using Annex SL for some of the key standards, and it wasn't an easy journey, having to, although ISO TC 176 and ISO TC 207 for quality and environmental management had quite a significant role in drafting the Annex SL, it wasn't an easy journey to incorporate that new structure and to adapt our standards to fit in with that new structure. But I do believe that as we move forward, the benefits to having done that will become ever more apparent as we add on extra components to the management system world. I mentioned about what I call broad quality. Broad quality for sustained success. We need to broaden our minds. We need to move away from that very small QA focus, meeting the requirements of our contractual customers, towards an end-to-end supply chain focus with a view to the total consumer experience. So this is where we started, looking at products and service quality, meeting contractual requirements. But is that enough? What about the overall experience of the customers? How easy is it to do business with our organization? How difficult do we make it? How are the communications? All those soft factors. From our internal part, what about productivity, profitability, the environment, health and safety, sustainability, social responsibility, and so on? So we start getting a broader perspective. And we also see these things extending along the supply chain to the overall consumer experience. And that overall consumer experience may be influenced by a 5th, 6th, 7th tier supplier. If, for example, they are found to be using child labor, or they're found to be using bonded labor, or they're not respecting human rights. Very, very quickly in today's social media world, the consumer can find out about that, find out that we either knew about it or had the possibility to know about it, and boycott our products and services. And so that broad quality perspective can be built onto the core ISO 9000 concept and be done very successfully. So I mentioned before, social dimension. ISO 26000 is not a management system standard, doesn't contain requirements, it's only guidance, and it's not for certification. But it can be deployed, and very effectively deployed, as part of an organization's management system. And last year, we had a couple of international workshop meetings, one in Stockholm in Sweden, one in London, and out of that was published the International Workshop Agreement 26, entitled How to Use ISO 26000 Within a Management System Context. And there are benefits from both sides if organizations do that. It will help to provide a discipline in managing the way in which social aspects are deployed within the organization, and equally it brings a different perspective to the management system when we consider those ILO conventions and the different components, the different human components to our business. This is where it gets a little bit tough to talk about, but it's something that we have to talk about. Recent quality scandals. I've made a point of not mentioning any particular names of organizations or countries, but we've seen children dying because of adulterated baby formula, where melamine has been added in order to increase the protein content. We've had horse meat in hamburgers. We've had salmonella in peanut butter, knowingly used in peanut butter. We've had manipulation of car exhaust emission test results. And more recently, in the last few months, we've seen 2 or 3 major organizations admitting to having falsified inspection reports in aerospace automotive sector. So the question then that inevitably is raised is, if these guys are ISO 9001 certified, why didn't the auditor find that? Why didn't the auditor detect that if they are doing a quality audit? Well, my response to that, and it is a very superficial response. We're starting to look at some of these things in much more detail. But my initial response is, are these really quality issues? Or really should we be treating them as fraudulent criminal activities? And if they are fraudulent criminal activities and they are done well, whatever that means, if they are done well and hidden very well, it would be, in my view, almost impossible for even the most competent, experienced quality management system auditor to detect those kind of things. And again, this brings us back to the whole cultural question. So I don't believe that we will ever be able to detect good, and I'm crossing my fingers as I use that word, good falsification of results. If it's done well, then it's very, very tough for an auditor to detect that. But these are things that we need to be aware of. Of course, these have huge implications. They have huge reputational implications for the organizations that are involved, for the auditors, for the certification community, and ultimately for the ISO 9000 name. Now, my term of office as chair of subcommittee 2 of ISO TC 176 comes to an end at the end of this year. But I'm very happy that I will be convening a new task group, which was formed a couple of months ago, on ISO 9001 brand integrity. And we will be working proactively together with the auditing community, together with the conformity assessment, certification bodies, accreditation bodies, to look at some of these issues and make sure that we can defend the credibility of our standard when it's used for certification purposes, and equally do that in an honest, proactive way. Not saying that everything is perfect, but looking and honing in on where problems may lie and how we can collectively work together to address those problems. So I'm not going to bow out. I'm not retiring from all of this. I want to make sure that this standard that so many people put a lot of loving care and attention into continues to be respected around the world. We then look at the question of what we can call the end-to-end components of the quality management system. The end-to-end in 2 dimensions. We have the customer requirements, which are transformed into, hopefully, customer satisfaction. But equally, within the management of the organizational strategy, which the system will help with execution. We need to make sure that the strategy aligns with the customer needs and expectations, and we need to ensure that the execution aligns to ensure customer satisfaction. And once again, we see our old friend, the PDCA cycle, coming into play. So what does this mean for auditors? Well, it means that the profession is becoming ever more demanding. We need to adopt a more holistic approach to our audits. We need to, of course, have good, deep knowledge of the audit criteria, but the less prescriptive requirements of those audit criteria, primarily here I'm referring to the standard, whether it's ISO 9001, 14001 or whatever, they tend to be less prescriptive. So they require us to have a deeper technical knowledge of the businesses that we're auditing to be able to make sound judgments. The organization comes along to us and says, oh, I don't need a documented procedure for this. We need to be able to question that. It may be based on legal or regulatory requirements. It may be based on knowledge of the business and the way in which the processes are managed. But we cannot just accept, tick the box, and move on. We need to continually ask the question, is the system delivering on its promise? Is an ISO 9001 based quality management system providing confidence to customers that they can buy from that organization and have a reasonable expectation of getting good products and services. So in conclusion, I believe that quality management is about much more than ISO 9001. It's about much more than having procedures. It's about much more than complying with a set of requirements. And it's actually much more than certification. It can do so much for an organization. If an organization embraces this in a wholesome, proactive way, we can move away from that narrow quality, what Dr. Duran used to call the quality with a small q, towards total quality, quality with a big Q, broad quality, which will provide everyone with confidence that the results that we want to achieve are actually being met. Whether that everyone is the customer, whether it's a regulatory body, whether it's an NGO, whether it's people with a social conscience, whether it's stakeholders, shareholders, and so on. It's all about providing confidence and getting results. And I believe that quality management provides us with that sound basis. So with that, I say thank you very much for your attention. And of course, passing back to Laura, I believe if you've listened through this, then this is eligible for 1 unit of continual professional development. So thanks very much for your attention. Let me hand back to Laura.
Thanks, Nigel. This ends today's presentation. Have a wonderful day.